Hello and welcome to the Builders Podcast. I'm Lee, and it's with great respect that I welcome today's esteemed guest, Mrs. Annie Lööf.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
A pleasure to have you here. A distinguished figure in Swedish politics, Annie notably served as Sweden's Minister for Enterprise, a role in which she championed innovative economic policies and advocated vigorously for entrepreneurship and growth. During this time, she implemented several key reforms to support businesses and promote innovation, working on a digital strategy for Sweden. As a former leader of the Centre Party, her commitment to sustainable development, democracy, and free enterprise has left an indelible mark on Swedish political life. More recently, Annie has transitioned into roles leveraging her expertise in business, law, and public service, focusing on advisory work, lecturing, and sitting on the boards of several companies, as well as Jönköping University. Annie, again, a warm welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me here. What a great presentation. I feel like, wow.
Well, thank you once again for joining us. Well, I think we can start by talking a little bit about your journey. So, what's gotten you to where you are today. So there were early beginnings. I believe you joined the Centre Party's youth wing at the age of 18.
Yes, I did.
Became a member of Parliament at the age of just 23, I believe, in 2006. You tell us a little bit about your early life and what it was that convinced you to pursue a career in politics at such a young age.
Yeah, but I grew up on the rural side, about 4 hours from Stockholm,
right.
With car, and it was like a very precious little village with my grandma, my mom and dad, my cousins, and I think that made me feel both comfortable and with self-confident as a very young kid. Mm-hmm. So I was the one who loved being in front of people. Mm-hmm. I played soccer back then, and I was the leader of the soccer team, talking with the club. And I've always I've always been engaged and committed to be spokesperson for the class, for the soccer team. Yeah. And during the gymnasium, between 16 and 18 years old, I started to think about ideological issues and political parties. Mm-hmm. And I started to read about political parties. And back then, and still, I was like a green social liberal, center-right-winged person. I didn't know that back then, but I thought that the sustainability issue, SMEs, and the freedom of speech and freedom of individuals was very essential. So I decided to be involved in the Centre Party. I was 19 years old back then. Mm-hmm. I was elected into the local government. Okay. And 4 years after that, I was elected to the national parliament, the Riksdag here in Sweden. Mm-hmm. And back then, I was the youngest person in the parliament. Mm-hmm. And it was like a huge step for me. Right. Being the first person in my family, being a student. Yeah. I was back at the Lund University, studied to become a lawyer. Mm-hmm. It was like a huge step for me. And then an even bigger step to become elected member of parliament at the age of 23. Yeah. So I moved from my student corridor to Stockholm and started to work here.
Super exciting. And I can imagine back then, maybe things have improved slightly, but back then at such a young age, and it was most likely quite a male-dominated environment as well, was it?
Yes, male-dominated, but also was quite odd to be a young woman. So I used to say I have two wrongs and two struggles to deal with.
Yeah, from the start.
From the start. But I think that made me stronger. I have done some uphill struggles and trips for several times. And the ones I had in the beginning, that formed me a lot.
Yeah. I can imagine. And during your time as leader of the Centre Party, I think this was during from 2011 to 2023, so like over a decade essentially.
Yeah, that's correct. I was 28 when I was elected.
Right. You navigated through challenging political landscapes. I'm just interested to hear, like, what were some of the biggest or most challenging moments, and indeed what were some of the most rewarding moments during this time?
No, I've been a leader and a manager actually for 17 years. When I was elected as a 23-year-old young person to the parliament, and when I quitted last year. And it has so many things has happened in Sweden, but also global. And I've been just in the middle of it. And actually, it started with the Lehman Brothers crisis, 2008, followed by an economic crisis here in Europe and in Sweden. And I became the Minister of Enterprise when I was elected to become the party leader of my party. I was also the Minister of Enterprise and the head of the Department of Energy, Infrastructure, industry, innovation, all kind of stuff in the economy. And it was very hard time back then. And after some years, Russia invaded a part of Ukraine in 2014. So the security issues came into my and the government's table.
Right.
And then you know all about this political polarization, the change of values, Trump being elected as president, Brexit, pandemic.
Turmoil times.
It has been so
across
many
the world.
so many changes. And when I was young, I hadn't found my leadership. So I needed to find my leadership and develop it just in front of everyone. So all my mistakes and all my faults, you have seen them on very bold headlines on the front pages. So it was a very fun and interesting trip these 17 years, but it was also very hard for me because being a young person, develop my management or leadership in front of everyone.
Yes.
It was targeting.
And I can imagine, like in that kind of position anyway, you have to be resilient, right? It's kind of resilient leadership as well, and particularly through such turmoil
and I learned
times.
how to endure. I learned how to be a leader within myself. So that's one of my key issues when I talk about leadership today, that you need to be confident in yourself.
Yes.
You need to be a leader for yourself. To become a leader for others, you need to be confident in yourself.
Exactly,
You need to trust your values, trust your ability. And I've learned it the hard way. But when I look back on the decades, when I've been a national figure here in Sweden, I see a strong young woman fight for green liberal values, and I'm very proud of that person because I learned so much during that trip, and I also made so many decisions, not having all the data or something on the table. So it was a terrific personal trip for my first 2 decades of grown-up life. Still only 40, but a veteran in politics.
Exactly, right. Quite uncommon, I would imagine.
Yes, it is, because when I was newly elected as MP here in Sweden, I was in a European network for young politicians.
Right.
And the common age of young politicians is about 45.
Right.
So when I went to those conferences, I was like, okay, they are 20 years older than me.
Standing out.
So I'm still a young politician, even if I've had 17 years of leadership.
Exactly. And we spoke a little bit about resilience, like resilient kind of leadership, but resilience, in politics here as well. Your career has not been without, personal risks. I believe you faced threats to your safety, which naturally then kind of leads or led to kind of increased, safety or security measures. How have you coped with these, these threats over? I believe there was, particular threats a couple of years ago, but during your time as well. How have you coped with these? What support systems have you had to kind of rely on or lean on during this time?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, it has been a hard shift in values during the last decade. Far right-winged extremist has formed like a context in both the Swedish society and global society. And those who are fighting for liberal values are seen as enemies to the world, the society they want to have. So I've been a target for the far-right extremists in Sweden for almost all my party leader time for 12 years. So I've been living with bodyguards for every day of my leadership. Still, I have it.
Yeah.
And I've wondered so many times, why me? But also, how do I manage, or how do my colleagues manage to endure all these hostility, hatred, harassment, threats, threats to my family, my kids, threats to me. But I have my drive is like, I want to watch myself in the mirror, and I want to say that I have the courage to stand firm and have trust to my values and my party's values, and that has been my support actually. My inner strength and my courage to stand firm has been my largest supporter for me to endure a decade of hatred and hostility. And also, of course, the 95% of the rest of the society, because they are normal people driving for positive change.
I can imagine when you're in that kind of position, it can be hard to remember that. These are just a select few.
It has been tough sometimes, but I wrote a book a year ago, and then I told them about my
vulnerability, right? Yeah.
That's a hard word to pronounce. Vulnerability.
Yes.
And I admit that I haven't been so open that I wanted to be. Because I used, during my part leader life, I used to say, okay, I have a Teflon surface, just they don't hit me in my heart.
Just bounces off.
It bounces off, and I continue my political leadership. But of course, it has affected me.
Right.
And it has affected me when I have had stressful situations, when it has been a lot to do at work and with less sleep, stressful situations, then of course it has affected me a lot. But I have continued for all years. But back in Almedalen and on the island of Gotland is a political rally or societal rally every year. It was a person who had actually followed me or scrutinized me for 8 years, and I was the main target for him. And he wanted to see me dead. And he actually killed a person in Almedalen 2022.
Right.
He had 3 targets, and I was one of them.
Okay.
And he's now been sentenced for that.
Right.
It's a terror attack, and during that summer, I started to think, is it worth it?
Right. Exactly.
Do I endure all this? is it enough? And it's quite hard debate to have with myself.
Right? You have those strong beliefs, but then also...
because when I had a discussion with my husband, he said, just quit.
Yeah.
And my dad, just quit.
Yeah.
And then I took the mirror again and I said, but I don't want them to win.
Right.
So I continued the election campaign, but the day after the election day, I woke up in my bed back home and I was so relieved. I was relieved that I have survived the election campaign. And that's a very strange feeling to have at work.
Yeah.
So then back home, I decided to quit. And some days after that, I had a press conference that I will resign.
Yeah.
And I felt so relieved because I say yes to the question, is it worth it? Was it worth it? Absolutely yes. I haven't regretted one day of my political leadership. It was all worth it, but it was too high political cost,
right.
too high costs, personal costs.
Yeah.
And I want to see my kids grow up.
Right.
They are 9 and 5 years old. I want to be a part of their life, not being harassed or a potential target for a murderer. So that was one of the largest argument for me to quit my political career 1.5 years ago.
I see. And beyond your political career, then there's always been this, I believe, this connection with the smaller businesses and kind of supporting the smaller businesses, startups, and everything. You've become actively involved in the business world, particularly in supporting startups and smaller businesses, right? Can you share how your political experience then has influenced your involvement in this kind of startup ecosystem, if we call it that, or kind of how you see your role in fostering innovation now?
I grew up in a spirit called the Gnosjö spirit. And the Gnosjö spirit is actually internationally well known as a spirit of SMEs collaborating both with each other, even competitors collaborate in an ecosystem, but also a good cooperation between local authorities and the SMEs. So in my home region, my constituency, my home region, we are well famous for having high employment and good integration and family-owned and drive businesses. So that's where I come from. And so for me, being a political leader, it's in those issues, it's very, very natural for me.
Right.
So I love to see engaged people having business ideas, create funding and start to employ people, develop their businesses. So it has been a core for me in my political leadership to foster entrepreneurship, innovation, SMEs, but also the ecosystem around it. And it is quite a bit similarities between the ecosystem for startups and the ecosystem in my home region. It's like heavy industry.
Yes,
but
yeah,
it's still SMEs collaborating with each other. And that's the main strength for Sweden, Stockholm, and to have this ecosystem, a cluster, so to say, to both because you can see role models, but you can also help each other, inspire each other, and allocate like funding and skills training in another way than if you are just one single company.
Yeah. And you mentioned there the word entrepreneurship and people having these kind of new the next big kind of idea and everything. So you've been a proponent of entrepreneurship, and during your time as Minister for Enterprise, as I mentioned in the intro, you implemented several key reforms essentially to promote innovation. Simplification of regulations, working on the digital strategy for Sweden, which we'll talk a little bit more shortly as well, I believe. From your experience working closely with businesses, what do you see as the top challenges entrepreneurs face today, and what practical advice would you offer to kind of overcome obstacles?
Of course, it depends on the time. So now the main struggles, I think, are funding and skilled people, and for some companies to enter international markets. And it depends on the business, and it depends on economic times. But in general, I would say it is in Sweden, it's high cost to employ because Sweden has gone from like heavy industry, which to a service-based industry.
Yep.
And then the costs for employment or employ is essential or crucial for a business to grow.
Right.
So to cut costs is important. To cut red tapes or obstacles is also very important for politicians to do. But also to create like a culture, a mindset that it's okay to do mistakes.
Right.
It's okay to fail. You can come back and do another business.
Yeah.
And for 15 years ago, when I started in politics, everyone talked about this culture because Sweden back then wasn't that good in fostering people to have courage to also fail. And we looked at the US and dreamt about their like culture, the American model. And I think that has changed now because I think it's a mindset here in Sweden that you can't fail and you can come back. And when I was Minister for Enterprise, like 13 years ago, I was very eager to start with this mindset in the lower classes in school. In Sweden, we have a project called Ung Företagsamhet, Young Entrepreneurship. And it's an organization in the civil society that works with both 15-year-olds and 18-year-olds, and they learn how to build a company, how to run a company, and then they need to shut it down as in the end. But it fosters creativity, and it fosters collaboration, and it fosters to trust in oneself, and that's the main thing I say, to have a country and or an economy based on innovation, creativity, and growth. To have people that are eager to create something, to dare to do something, and I think Sweden has been better on that the last 2 decades than before.
Yeah, I can imagine such programs are really, really important for ingraining this kind of way of thinking, this culture that you were talking about from such a young age. And we're talking about you mentioned skills or lack of skills, this kind of skills gap as previously, and I think this relates slightly to kind of this digital transformation as a digital strategy that you're working on for Sweden as well. Just on this point, I think the EU has really ambitious goals for the digital kind of transformation of businesses, right? They've set targets for 2030, I believe, where they're aiming for what I've seen 90% of SMEs to kind of reach at least a basic level of digital intensity. 75% of EU companies to use cloud computing services, working with kind of big data analysis, using AI, artificial intelligence. But as of last year, 2023, 59% of these EU businesses had reached this kind of basic level of digital intensity. Notably, and the point I'm getting to here is that Sweden, other Northern European countries, Finland, Denmark, for example, are quite a way ahead of their counterparts. I think 80% of Swedish companies have reached that kind of basic level. What lessons do you think other regions can learn from Sweden's kind of relative success in kind of digital transformation?
First, of course, the digital infrastructure.
Yes.
To build the digital infrastructure, it's so important. But also to have education and skills training on like AI or before digitalization. And it's crucial. It's also important to have to open the digital inner market within the European Union. And we still have some steps to go there. That's important. But I do also think that Sweden's early steps towards innovation hubs, accelerators, startup scenes has been very crucial for also large companies in Sweden to adopt like agile innovation processes and so on. So when I also launched during my time as a minister the National Innovation Strategy. And it was based on collaboration to bridge the gap between academia and the business sector, but also to find collaborations between different business sectors, that the creative sector could collaborate with the wood sector and to find new ideas and so on. But also that it's crucial to all kind of businesses to adopt the digital agenda, to try to, if you're a new company, to try to be digital from day one. To create safety and of course like with the intellectual property rights from day one to create a safe environment for data. It's crucial. But Sweden has still some leaps to go in with our authorities to have these open data spaces to foster like an environment among our many authorities, because Sweden is like, we have many authorities, and they have a lot of important data where entrepreneurs can use them to create new ideas. So some weeks ago, I was at a conference here in Stockholm, and one of the defense authorities were there. And I became so glad because the manager from this authority, he said, I will start a new area here for you because I want you here, all the entrepreneurs here, to help us form like a cybersecurity environment that are world class. And then you need to let entrepreneurs and startups into this very traditional sector. So we can do a lot.
Yes, indeed. And I think it's also important to kind of highlight the important role that these kind of smaller businesses, SMEs, SMBs, if you know.
I would say SMEs. I would first of all, I would say the large companies of Sweden, the traditional ones, as Ericsson, ABB, all the largest companies, they have been crucial for our reputation worldwide. And they have been a huge and important trademark for Sweden. For having all the talents moving here to Sweden. Saying that the SMEs and the startup world is so crucial for the larger ones to stay competitive and to develop their businesses. So it's a collaboration between the large ones and the small ones.
Absolutely.
And in politics, I would say during my whole career, it has been like a wall between them. And in the beginning of my career, I got a question, okay, are you pro large companies or pro SMEs?
Right, one or the other.
And I'm pro of both of them. But if I will take some political measures, I will do it for the SMEs. Because they are the creators of new jobs. They are the creators of innovation and creativity that will help the large companies to stay competitive. So
exactly. So we don't end up with monopolies, right? But I think it's a super interesting point because, they're creators of new jobs. I think vital for economic growth and innovation. I think in the EU alone, these kind of SMEs are responsible for over 100 million jobs. It's like 2/3 of the workforce, essentially. And I think over 99% of all businesses in the block. These are significant numbers. But one point on this kind of digital transformation and growth and innovation is that despite their significant role, I think only around 20% of these SMEs offer, for example, information and communication technology training, ICT training to their staff. I think the figure's higher in Sweden. But compared then to kind of 70% of large businesses, right? So I mean, it's again the point of kind of infrastructure, limited resources, and everything among these companies. This highlights a potential area for improvement, of course. But what would you say are kind of some effective ways for such companies, these SMEs, to enhance their digital capabilities when they might have these kind of limited resources, the kind of lack of infrastructure from the start naturally? Does it boil down to kind of funding and these matters?
I think first you need to start with creating a strategy and have a vision and review the strategy to always be close to market and market changes, and that's like the foundation of being competitive. But then, of course, it's important both to have focus on cash flow, but of course to have focus on funding. And I think it's easier when you're in the very beginning of your career as an entrepreneur. I think it's easier to start in an environment where you can meet others. Like in Sweden, we have like those science parks or epicenter and hubs.
Yes.
But you find all support or help you can have. That's a important thing. But also I would say this is a very boring question, but have focus on costs. Because if you have like focus on cash flow, you can do the development step by step.
Right.
And you want to grow your business, and to grow you need skilled people.
Yes. Yeah.
So to stay competitive with like an economic agenda for the company, but also to recruit talents will help you to recruit other talents. And the lack of infrastructure, it's hard to manage for a single company, but then you need to. In Sweden, we have digital infrastructure, but as you said, it's not the same in all kinds of all these countries in Europe. But to be a part of business networks that promote talks to the local or governmental politicians, and to use those kind of networks to say your view to change the foundation of digital infrastructure is one key. You can't do everything on your own. You can to take help.
Exactly, and kind of benefit from things that are already benefiting others, right? But I'd like to get your take also on the fact of regulation, which obviously is important, but can also kind of prohibit or kind of strangle companies. Let's say, simply put, it can kind of disproportionately impact or disadvantage smaller businesses. Of course, again due to kind of limited resources and infrastructure and stuff like this. But we know that there is super important kind of consumer protection and all of these things, but what are the most effective ways and strategies that we can put in place in terms of balancing innovation with regulation so that the financial burden for new companies, smaller companies, does not deter these people from establishing new companies and doesn't disadvantage those already established smaller companies as well?
This is actually a very crucial issue for the moment with the AI Act, for instance.
That was introduced this year.
Yeah, this
proposed
year.
A few years ago, but introduced this year.
And in Europe, actually, we now regulate the application, not the profound technology, or license the profound technology. And it's I would say if if I had the majority here, I would have focused the legislation on the profound technology and to license the crucial parts of the technology to create like a responsibility for the owners of the technology, not the application part.
So it's more the kind of underlying technology upon which these applications are built, right?
Because the challenge now is that if you regulate the application too much, it will decrease the creativity and innovation, and it will form a lack of competitiveness for European companies compared to the Americans, for instance. But now we have the AI Act, so you need to follow it.
Yeah, exactly. And this is, like you said, this is kind of categorizing then AI applications into kind of risk levels and imposing them various compliance requirements, right? Which can be, can kind of, it's an added hurdle, right, for these companies.
Yeah, and of course you need to regulate. Of course, and you need to have ethics standards. You need to foster a ethics standards and an environment for us in the society, together with the business sector, to not everything needs to be a legislation,
right?
Because the competitiveness of the European Union and Sweden has been business sector together with authorities that has worked together, and now everyone is very afraid of what will happen with the new technology as AI, for instance. And if we regulate too much, it'll affect our economy in a bad manner.
And the speed at which new products, new companies are kind of established, right? I think it's really interesting, kind of balance that fine balance, right? I think it's kind of you have that need for regulation to ensure this kind of fair competition, but also consumer protection, which I mentioned before.
But I'm also very glad to see all the measures that has been taken by the European Commission, but also the Swedish government, both now and back 5 years back, to invest in research and development, in AI, in hubs, because that foster a agile leadership and innovation environment that can create like the coming stars, and that's the one, that's a perspective that I am so impressed of, because real business leaders or real like entrepreneurs, they'll always find a way of making business.
They might hit a wall here, but then
then they take another door here.
Exactly.
And that impressed me a lot.
And you mentioned the point that not everything requires legislation and everything. Do you think there can be far too much regulation? I think
absolutely.
and a really interesting point. I think it was an interview with Elon Musk. So many interviews to look at, but he mentioned the fact that something along the lines of the fact that regulations, rules and regulations, they're essentially immortal, right? They don't die. There's no kind of effective garbage collection system, right? There's no kind of removal or not a kind of structured way of looking at them, updating them to ensure they remain kind of relevant and effective, essentially.
Exactly.
What's your take on this?
Yeah, in Sweden we call it like, this is a direct translation, like sunset legislation.
Right.
We want to have like sunset legislation. So when my party, so to say. So when you introduce a new legislation, it is for like 5 or 7 years, and then you review the legislation after 4 or 5 years and see, okay, was that legislation for good or for bad? Did we use it? Does it harm the business sector, or is it like supportive? And if the answer is no, it was like a bad legislation, just put it away, and create something new, or leave it there.
Fantastic.
And that was a system I was very impressed by in UK. I had a close collaboration with my counterpart or colleague in Britain back then, and they had like this sunset legislations, and they had a national authority scrutinizing or reviewed all the legislation on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And we've started with that in Sweden, and then we close it down, and then we start it up again, and then we close it. And I think we need to be more continuous.
Right. And why did you stop it? Why did you close it? And then
I didn't stop it.
Right.
It's like all parties have their measures
agenda,
to create and foster innovation in businesses. So we have had different government in Sweden the last decades.
Yes. I mean, still on the topic of entrepreneurship, looking at kind of future technologies, we've been touching on kind of AI a little bit, but in your view, what future technologies should companies look to invest in to kind of maintain a competitive edge?
I've had one regulation for me, actually, and it's not as a politician to point out the new technology.
Right.
So it's hard for me to answer that question because I think the entrepreneurs will find their way, and the society's way, actually. But of course, you need to have focus on AI and the next level of technology after that. Of course, but it will. The only thing we know for now is it will get even faster the coming years. And it's still only like 15 years we saw the first smartphone.
Right, exactly.
And that has changed the whole thing of like payment and communicate. And AI will change our society as well in a positive manner, of course. But of course, it has also some negative aspects. And then we need to have focus on, of course. But as a politician, I would say, I'm not a politician anymore, say. Yeah, but as
I was going to point that out.
As a former politician, I would say I'm very sensitive. Like I want to pick the winners, and I want to pick the winner technology, but I want the entrepreneurs to find a way forward.
No, I think it's hard to pick.
And the researchers, of course.
And research is super important, and you can kind of understand why the kind of AI Act is being implemented, given the kind of unknowns or the potential risks, safety risks, and everything. So, it makes sense. But looking also at kind of leveraging digital tools, kind of more practically, I think it's quite fair to say that the COVID-19 pandemic kind of accelerated, you could say, this digitalization across Europe, among European firms and wider as well. I mean, largely driven by the kind of need to adopt these digital tools to kind of enable the remote working, online sales, digital communication, and the rest of it, created both challenges and opportunities for companies, right? How can young entrepreneurs, do you think, best kind of leverage digital tools and technologies to kind of grow their businesses?
It's very crucial from the start, I would say. So you need to have the digital technology in the core of your business and in the core of the strategy, because it's the key element to be international from day one. And to survive in this economic world, you need to, not of course all businesses, but when we talk about startups and digital startups, you need to have it in the core of the business to survive.
I think
and to reach your consumers and also your suppliers. And it's the core. It's like the classical roads outside here.
Exactly.
The digital infrastructure is the classical roads and railways.
It's almost like if a company's not digital today, they're not, maybe it's like just on a physical kind of premise and that's it. It's kind of, they're not kind of remote then, they're not international.
And I noticed actually, like a year ago, I got this, wow, I didn't have my wallet. I on my phone. where is
Lucky
my
you're in
driving
Sweden.
license? Because it's back home in my wallet.
Yeah.
But it's you live a totally digital life.
Yeah.
Now, and the people that are in the like 15 years old right now, they have only lived the digital life.
That's all they know, right?
Yeah. And I have like had this, even if I'm only 40, I've had this, what do you call it? Checkhefte?
The checkbook.
Yeah, checkbook.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and it's like historic.
Yeah.
When I show my 9-year-old daughter my telephone back home at my parents' house, like it's a big one,
The
like
old,
putting here.
Yeah.
And it's so fun because when the adult ones, when we say, can you phone and will you do like this?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And my daughter was, what?
What's
It's
that?
like this.
Exactly, you
FaceTime.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Talking about mindset, I think it's so important to of course we should learn from the past, of course, but we need to look at the future, and it'll be better step by step, and of course we will have uphill struggles, and we will have new challenges all the time. It's what leadership and entrepreneurship is about: to handle struggles and to come over them and continue the way. So you need to slightly look back, but have the main focus forward.
You mentioned the word leadership there as well. Let's talk a little bit more about leadership specifically. Leadership philosophy. I've seen your leadership style described as direct and transparent. You tell me if that's right or not, but perhaps helpful in kind of building trust and navigating these complex landscapes, which you've had to do. Whether these are business or kind of political landscapes as well. How would you describe your leadership style? Who and what has influenced it the most?
I would say it's always hard to describe my own leadership, because my leadership is how others see it.
See it, yeah.
So, but
good point. Yeah.
I've aimed to be a leader that is trust-based leadership. I think it's in English called servant leadership, say supportive leadership. Yeah. You have common goals or targets for long-term and short-term. I've always worked with targets. And it's so crucial to have the team or the voters, but my team, my colleagues in my party, to have focus on the targets. But as a trust-based leader, they need to find their best way to do it.
Right.
So I can't decide everything, but I need to create the infrastructure, the culture, the sense of working. And actually the trust-based leadership compared to the authoritarian leadership is much more modern. And I think it has come more and more after the pandemic. Because then you need to work more trust-based. When you work digital, some work at home, some work in the cottage, some work at the workplace. You need, as a manager and a leader, trust in your employees, trust in your colleagues, and that's my theory of lead. But another thing that has been important to me is that I've never seen myself as a boss. The Swedish word is chef, boss. I used to see myself as a leader among my colleagues or employees, because if you have courage and trust to yourself and your values, if you are present and there at the workplace or at the phone for your employees if they work at home, if you're present and there, it is very important to anchor and to like find the core elements to succeed, to walk and work along with the employees
as one team.
It's one team. That's crucial for me. And of course, I think it's in the description of transparent, and but it's also very important to make a decision. But you need to listen before you make the decisions.
Exactly. Is it more kind of as opposed
and that's
to
the hard thing?
Because then if you make
when have you listened enough to make a decision?
Because you need to make that decision. The authoritarian way would be, okay, I've made the decision. No one else's opinion matters. Really.
And the employees, but what?
Yeah, exactly. So this kind of trust-based, principle, if you call it that, is more, having or kind of getting that collaboration of ideas and everything, and together taking that decision.
Yeah, and to employ people that are better than you.
Right.
I know it's a cliche that a leader says that, but you need to employ people that are experts on different things.
Yeah.
And you as a leader, of course, you are overall like mini experts on everything. Yep. But you need to have high-level experts on each sector. So you can be challenged, and they can also serve you with new facts, new research. But most of all, you can be challenged in your leadership. That's a crucial part.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very interesting point. It was going to be a question around this kind of kind of most effective strategies in building and leading these high-performing teams. So it's a very interesting point. But what about empowering these team members then? Kind of is crucial for fostering this innovation, maintaining high levels of motivation, right? How do you advise leaders to empower their team members to take initiative to kind of contribute with their new ideas?
I have lectures in like leadership in changing times and so on, like the cliche after cliche here. But to lead in change and to lead with passion, you need to have passionate employees, and they will work value-based if you are value-based, and if you delegate mandate to them. If they are an important part of the company's or party's journey, you'll feel it, and they'll feel it. And if they only feels like they are, they come to work, they do their work, they go home, the company or the party won't grow.
Right.
So the success factor, the key factors to become successful is to create an environment where you have like a force that will go together forward. And that's the tricky part. Being a political leader, you are of course the manager with like talks about salaries and conditions and so on. But and I negotiated a lot the state budget and legislation. But the third part is being try to be an inspirational leader,
right,
a visionary leader, and to set goals, how to like come forward, not only to have like I will have 10% of the voters, but what kind of party do we want to be in 10 years? And what are the main societal challenges and what solutions are ours on that these challenges? Because that creates a feeling at a workplace that you are here for a bigger purpose. And that's a similarity between the ecosystem and the startups ecosystem and the party system. Because the startup scene is very value-based driven. And the party system is also here or not, but value-based. So all parties in almost every country are like they want to create a better society. But we have different solutions on the problems and different ideological platforms. But it's the same with entrepreneurs. So if you create an environment where the employees and the colleagues, I used to say colleagues, feel that they are there for a bigger purpose, they will do a better job because they will invest not only their time, but also their not their life, because they need to be
work-life balance.
But they need to like put in other things than only the time. They want to create something together with you and together with the colleagues. And that's why you can see the unicorns here from Sweden or from elsewhere, because they have made like an environment where people want to be and to create something together with others.
Journey. I think it's a super interesting point in that kind of part of a bigger purpose, part of the kind of the bigger journey, because I think it holds true regardless of kind of company size, essentially. Very interesting. What about part of leadership is kind of, managing crises, different
all
points
the time,
in time.
every day.
Yeah, right? During your tenure as Minister for Enterprise, I'd imagine, and during your time in politics, of course, there would have been several crises. But can you share any specific example or a crisis you managed and what you learned from it? What the team learned from it?
I used to say a bit cheerfully to my closest colleagues that it'll never get boring at work, because it went too fast and it was a crisis. Small or big, almost every day or every week.
Right.
And leadership is about handling crisis and how to handle it. And when I told you before, I wrote a book a year ago, and then I read all my diaries from my years in politics. And what I learned from reading them, because I didn't have time for reflection during my time as a politician.
You kept these diaries throughout the years.
I kept it.
Fantastic.
When I read the diaries a year ago, I noticed that the crisis I handled in the beginning, I felt it was like huge. It was so hard for me. I couldn't sleep, and it was like, I almost died. And when looking now, like 10 years later, on that crisis, it was like, what? It's like a wind, like what do you call it?
So like something good happen tomorrow morning.
Okay. So you get better on handling crisis, and you learn every week and every day how to do it better. And of course, it was a huge crisis back then. But you learn all the time, and you become more safer, and you more you create security not only for yourself but also for your colleagues. And I've handled both professional and private crises during those years. Professional ones is those that I mentioned before, like Russians' war in Ukraine, the pandemic, economic crisis, of course, like in the middle of it. But also for my party, we have had a different crisis. In the beginning, back then, I pointed, when I was newly elected as party leader and Minister of Enterprise, my polls were so low. Very low. And my trust polls as a leader was very low. And it was very hard for me to handle, because all interviews was about, how do you manage? Why aren't you quit the job? And I wanted to talk about all that I'd done with SMEs as Minister of Enterprise. And then it changed. Like 3 years later, I was I was number one for several years in the trust polls. And back in 2018, we did our best election result in 30 years. So I've had both ups and downs. And of course, that was hard for me to handle back then, the struggles. But I've also struggled private ones. We have mentioned all the hatred and death threats, but 2019, I was pregnant with my second child, and she needed to come out in week 28, like 3 months before. And it's my largest trauma in life. I made 3 major surgeries in 3 weeks, within 3 weeks. And I was suffering because I nearly died in December 2019. It was it was very. It was a very hard time for me and my family back then. And then I also, me and my little daughter Saga, she's a 5-year-old full of life and healthy child now. That's why I can talk about it. But we stayed at the hospital here in Stockholm for 3 months. And then I started to have discussions with myself, like, will I go back or will I stay? Because I was so happy that I survived. And I was so happy to have her in my life. And I become like it. I did a deep dive inside of me. But then after some months, when we became stronger, both of us, I decided, I need to come back, of course. I have this driving force inside me to change and to make the society better. But that was it is still, and hopefully will be my trauma of life.
Right.
And it was right in the middle of my political career.
I was going to say, to kind of traumatic experience in it and of itself, but then to have that kind of going on, whilst you're
but back to the trust-based leadership, because I was totally gone for several weeks. And the deputy party leader, Anders, he just stepped in. And he ran the party, and he took the interviews, and he ran the party for like 9 months. And after some weeks after the surgery, we started to have phone calls, of course. But he just stepped in and took over and continued with this trust-based leadership. So I think it's important notice for a CEO or for a party leader or for a leader that you need to have people around you that can secure transitions, that can secure safety for you. And you need to have you need to say to yourself that you don't need to be at work all the time. Because you have recruited people there that are so much better than you.
In those roles for a good reason, right?
And they will take responsibility if and the toughest responsibility, the top level responsibility, if they are forced to.
Really interesting, and thanks for opening up on that traumatic experience. But a little bit about the future of leadership. Obviously, it's evolving rapidly. Like challenges emerge on a global scale. Really, no, you would have seen this firsthand in your time in Swedish politics, international engagements, and everything. What do you believe are the kind of critical kind of qualities and abilities for future business leaders?
To be a thought leader, I would say. To see oneself as a thought leader, even if you're a party leader or a business leader. To stand firm in the values. To run a business not only for growth. Of course, you run it for growth and for for money, but also to make a societal change. That is I will say it's the most crucial part. I'm engaged in one company called Green Iron, and our main focus is the shareholders, of course, to make growth. But our main focus is to decrease the climate. The
carbon footprint.
The carbon footprint. That's the main purpose of the company. And if we do that, it creates growth. To
the benefit of the shareholders, but also hopefully to the benefit of
so I would say purpose-driven leaders with the ability to make decisions and to recruit talents.
Very interesting. We a little bit on kind of personal reflections now as well. Kind of rounding off a little bit. we spoke a little bit earlier about kind of work-life balance and everything. You've had
I always say I have work-life balance.
Everyone wants it.
No.
Do they have it truly? You've been balancing a demanding career with personal life, right? And I think a lot of people struggle with this. Entrepreneurs among them, they're just really wanting to get their next idea off of the ground. You are a mother of two. You've managed to juggle these responsibilities while working in a highly public role, and now obviously transitioning into these new roles that you're working in. How have you managed to balance such a demanding career, and what would your tips be for others struggling with this issue?
My first tips you can manage that, because if I, as a political leader, has managed to like giving birth to two kids. I had the paternity leave on both. I think almost everyone can deal with that. And you need to have a great partner, of course, because this is to have a work-life balance. It's hard to fix, but to try to have a work-life balance, then you need to have a partner that you can share it with. Yeah. And my husband, of course, he has done a lot during these years, but he hasn't made more than 50%.
Right.
So we have split, and we have shared the days when they need to be home, and when they have these summer vacations, all that kind of stuff. Buying food, cleaning the house, all that kind of stuff. I live like quite an ordinary person, I think. As I have grown up, I live it still.
That's how you live now.
I live the same. And I think that's important because my husband and I, we decided when we got married 2011, the same year as I was elected.
Okay, what a year.
What a year. We decided that if we had the ability to have kids together, we wanted them to have the childhood as we had, with parents that are there for them. So we took an active decision not to have like a full-time babysitter or au pair, and so to say. So of course we have had babysitters, and, and my parents have been there for them sometimes. But when I quitted my political career, both my husband and I, we said, we managed.
We made it out the other side.
But now it's his turn actually to travel in his work. Okay. So for 10 years, he didn't travel that much. So he traveled to the workplace and back.
Right.
But now he can travel in the world, and I stay more at home. So it's also that kind of work-life balance within like a partnership or a relation to give the other one space to develop.
Exactly. So not just having the team at work and at the office, but also a team at home.
At home. That's been very important for me all these years.
Talking of kind of legacy as well, just an interesting one for me, like reflecting on a long, impactful kind of career in Swedish politics. I think it'd be interesting to kind of for you to consider like the legacy one leaves behind, not just like what lies ahead in the future, right? What do you hope your legacy is or will be?
The legacy is about what other people think that I've done. And I think many people in Sweden would say that I stand firm against far-right extremists or the, as in Sweden, or the Sweden Democrats, the right-wing populists in Sweden. I stand firm for green liberal values. That'll be one of my legacies. And the other ones, I would say that I always talked about collaboration.
Right.
And to form like a majority in the middle, to collaborate more between the decent parties, to to form majorities, to make structural reforms. So those two like foundations.
Yep.
I do hope will be my legacy. I don't know, but I do hope
it's hard to control as well, isn't it? But what about future plans then? I mentioned in the intro how you've kind of transitioned from your political career into these new roles, advisory work and lecturing and sitting on the boards of different companies. First of all, how are you finding this new phase of your career, let's say?
Oh, I feel so free. Like it's I love my life. I loved it before as well.
Yeah.
I left, even if I left with the sense of that I was relieved having survived the election campaign. Yeah. That was one part. But the last day at work, I felt my work was so meaningful, and I had fun at work, and I loved my colleagues, and the purpose-driven environment. I really loved it. But I felt that I'm done. Now I need to do something else. So I decided a year ago that I want to be a part of different kind of journeys for organizations and enterprises that are value-driven.
Right.
Because I still have my values and I still have my drive to change, but I'll do it. I will support others to do it. So I'm a board member for several companies in all kinds of sectors, actually.
Right.
And I'm also a senior advisor to some companies and make some lectures about leadership. And that's a perfect mix. And for the first time in my life, I work like normal full-time.
Right. Yeah.
I think it's normal full-time because I haven't worked as a full-timer, like 40 hours a week. I've worked way more all the time. Yeah. Because being a party leader and a politician is like a lifestyle.
Yes.
So you are always at work all the time. Not physically, but you are in your minds always at work. And you have a responsibility 24/7 every day of the year. But now I work like ordinary work days.
Yeah.
And I'm off evening and weekends. And we'll have like 6 weeks of vacation this summer. I was like 12 last time.
What were you doing with those 6 weeks?
I will be with my kids. Yeah. We will go to we will go sunbathing. We will buy ice creams. We will, the little girl need to learn how to bicycle. And I will do like classical summer things with my family this summer.
Yeah. And I'm also interested finally here as well to kind of just to get your take on kind of the main struggles that you're seeing in these different companies that you're a part of now, because I mean you've, like I said, transitioned into these roles before. I guess you now have more of a kind of insider's perspective in these kind of struggles and everything in a way that maybe you wouldn't have had before. What are the kind of main struggles in these different companies?
It depends, of course, but working with, for instance, the green transition industry, it's about permits and the length of the processes to get a permit.
Right.
And I had the eyes on that as a politician, of course, and we tried to cut the limits, but we didn't do enough.
Right.
And it made me so frustrated sitting there as a board member and said, how can it take such a long time? So the permits, of course, but also I would say the bridge between politician and business leaders, I would say it's not in the business sector where I work now. They asked me things that I asked, why do you ask this kind of things? Just network with politicians.
Right.
And the same in the political sector, because they don't understand business leaders all the time.
Right. Yeah.
So you need to build this bridge.
And get closer to
get closer to each other, have collaboration networks and also having business leader enter the political systems and vice versa, of course, to encourage ourselves on both sides to understand each other more. And of course, the high taxes on building companies. But all these kind of stuff, I had my eyes on as a politician, but I didn't have the majority for it.
Right.
But now I'm even more convinced. So maybe I'll get back to politics.
Exactly. It's like kind of insider perspective, which I guess can be a bit different.
Like a trip to the business sector for some years.
Yeah,
and now I know.
Exactly. No. But has this, like, let's call it a new perspective, this insider perspective, as I've mentioned, kind of, has it influenced your views on kind of policy or business strategy? That's what you're talking about. How long can it take to kind of get these permits and stuff like this? Is any other kind of examples where you just kind of maybe made you think differently to what you did when you were a politician?
But another thing is that it doesn't. It's not that a big difference, actually.
Right.
Between the political sector and the business sector, I would say, because a year ago I was a bit nervous or worried about taking a seat in a board because I haven't done that before. But I have been chair in my party for 12 years.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a huge difference. But when I entered some of the boards, I noticed it's the same way of lead. Take a lead. It's the same way of making a strategy, but of course with a different content. But the strategy, business plan. I didn't have a business plan as a party leader, but we had like a plan to success, to succeed and success in the elections, and to recruit people, educate and skill them. It's quite the same, but with, of course, different content. And that surprised me a bit.
Right.
And it makes my new life a bit easier than I expected a year ago.
Yeah.
Because I can help the companies with my leadership and strategic experience.
Transferable skills.
And transfer the skills into the business sector in an easier way than I actually expected. So that's that it highlighted me a year ago.
Fantastic. And last one from me. What are your plans for the future?
My plans for the future is to continue making change, actually, to improve the society. And I know it's a cliche, but I think that's my main purpose, to be value-driven and to be in an environment where I can be together with others to change something and change and have solutions to societal challenges. But I can do it in different manners.
Yeah.
For now and for some years from now and forward, I think I will do it in my own business, like being a senior advisor, being a board member, being a lecturer. But in 5 or 10 years, maybe I will have a operational position in an organization or an institute or in the business sector. I don't know, actually. So this year I learned myself, and I said to myself, don't decide what you will do in the coming 5 years too early.
Yeah.
So I have my doors wide open, and I'm very comfortable with my life right now. I have fun every day, and I meet a lot of people. And it feels very meaningful. But I do hope that I will feel the same in 5 years or 10 years. But I don't. But I won't be at the same space or same spot as I am today. I will be somewhere else.
Yeah.
And the future will show me.
Exactly. It must be a lovely kind of feeling, exciting as well.
And during that period of time, my kids will grow, so I can have have meaningful days at work and meaningful evenings and weekends with my kids. Following them to their soccer games and when they are dancing and
are they captains of their teams like you were? You mentioned in the beginning.
Not yet.
Not yet.
They're only she's only 9, but maybe in the future when she is like 11.
Yes. Okay, great. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add before I wrap up?
Thank you for a very interesting conversation.
No, thank you.
I'm so glad that I've said yes to this, and thank you for the invitation.
A pleasure. And that brings us to the end of another enlightening episode of Builders. Once again, thank you so much, Annie, for joining us, for sharing your valuable insights on innovation, leadership, entrepreneurship, lots more. It's a fantastic conversation. Thank you. For our listeners, I really hope that you also found the discussion interesting and engaging, and that it's given you a deeper understanding of how leadership and entrepreneurship innovation can really drive business success. Please don't forget to subscribe to Builders on your favorite podcast platform to keep up to date with the latest and greatest episodes. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, keep innovating, keep building, and see you soon.